welcome to this special documentary on one of the most infamous figures in modern history, Osama bin Laden, the man widely regarded as the mastermind behind the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks that shook the world. Born in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia in 1957, bin Laden was the son of a wealthy construction magnate with close ties to the Saudi royal family. Despite his privileged upbringing, he chose a path of radicalism that would eventually make him the face of global terrorism. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, bin Laden was deeply influenced by the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. He traveled there to join the fight, using his fortune to fund fighters, weapons, and training camps. This was the beginning of what would become Al-Qaeda, a militant network that would evolve into the most feared terrorist organization of its time. To his followers, bin Laden was a charismatic leader who spoke of defending Islam against what he described as Western aggression. But to much of the world, he was a ruthless extremist with a single-minded goal of waging jihad on a global scale. Throughout the 1990s, Al-Qaeda launched a series of deadly attacks, including the bombings of U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania in 1998, killing hundreds and injuring thousands. This escalated tensions with the United States, leading to bin Laden becoming a top target of American intelligence. But despite multiple warnings and efforts to capture him, bin Laden managed to evade authorities, moving between Afghanistan and Pakistan while continuing to build his network. His ideology centered on the idea that attacking the United States, which he viewed as the leading power supporting governments he opposed in the Middle East, would inspire a global uprising among Muslims. On September 11, 2001, that ideology culminated in the deadliest terrorist attack in American history. 19 hijackers, trained and directed by Al-Qaeda, seized 4 commercial airplanes. 2 were flown into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in New York City. 1 struck the Pentagon, and another, United Airlines Flight 93, crashed in Pennsylvania after passengers fought back. Nearly 3,000 innocent people lost their lives that day, and the world watched in horror as the towers collapsed, symbolizing not just the destruction of buildings but the start of a new era defined by global terrorism and the war on terror. In the aftermath, Osama bin Laden became the most wanted man on earth. The U.S. launched a military invasion of Afghanistan to dismantle Al-Qaeda and remove the Taliban regime that sheltered him. Despite intense military pressure, bin Laden remained elusive for nearly a decade, releasing video and audio tapes to taunt the West and inspire more attacks. For many, his ability to hide became a symbol of frustration in the fight against terrorism. Finally, on May 2, 2011, a covert operation by U.S. Navy SEALs in Abbottabad, Pakistan, brought his life to an end. In a daring nighttime raid, bin Laden was killed, and his body buried at sea. The death of Osama bin Laden marked a turning point, but it did not erase the pain of 9/11 or the continuing threat of extremism. His actions reshaped global security, led to wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, and changed the way nations approach terrorism. To this day, his name remains synonymous with fear, violence, and the devastating consequences of fanaticism. His story is not just about one man, but about the forces of ideology, power, and extremism that can alter the course of history. This documentary reminds us of the tragic cost of terrorism and the importance of remaining vigilant against those who seek to destroy peace. The legacy of Osama bin Laden is one of destruction and division, but also a lesson in the resilience of nations and the enduring spirit of the people who refuse to let fear win. Osama bin Laden's life and actions cannot be understood without tracing the journey that took him from a wealthy Saudi family to becoming the most infamous terrorist in the world. From an early age, bin Laden was deeply religious, influenced by conservative Islamic teachings. His worldview hardened during the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979, when he joined the Mujahideen resistance fighters. He used his resources to build training camps, bring fighters from across the Muslim world, and create networks that would eventually form Al-Qaeda, meaning the base. For him, Afghanistan was not just a battleground, but a proving ground for global jihad. The victory of the Mujahideen against the Soviets convinced bin Laden that organized Islamic resistance could defeat a superpower, a lesson he would later apply to his war against the United States. In the 1990s, bin Laden shifted focus from local conflicts to what he called the far enemy, the United States and its allies. He saw American presence in Saudi Arabia, especially after the Gulf War of 1991, as an occupation of Islam's holiest lands. His rhetoric became sharper, and in 1996, he issued a declaration of jihad against the United States. 2 years later, he followed it with another fatwa, calling for the killing of Americans and their allies wherever possible. These declarations made him a central figure in the rise of transnational terrorism. Al-Qaeda became not just a network but a movement, training thousands of militants who would spread across the globe, carrying out attacks in Africa, the Middle East, and beyond. The embassy bombings in Nairobi and Dar es Salaam in 1998 were a turning point. Coordinated explosions killed more than 200 people and injured thousands, drawing the world's attention to Al-Qaeda's reach. The U.S. responded with missile strikes on suspected training camps, but bin Laden survived and emerged, even more defiant. In 2000, the bombing of the USS Cole in Yemen killed 17 American sailors, again demonstrating Al-Qaeda's capability. Despite being on the FBI's most wanted list, bin Laden continued to plan an attack that would eclipse anything the world had seen before. That attack came on September 11, 2001. The scale and precision of 9/11 shocked the world. 4 hijacked planes, meticulously coordinated, struck at the heart of America's economic and military power. The images of the Twin Towers collapsing became etched into global memory. For bin Laden, it was a statement of power, but for millions, it was a day of unimaginable grief. Entire families were destroyed, cities changed forever, and global politics entered a new era. The United States declared a war on terror, beginning with an invasion of Afghanistan to dismantle Al-Qaeda and overthrow the Taliban. Yet bin Laden slipped away from the Tora Bora Mountains, evading capture through networks of loyalists and sympathetic tribal leaders. For nearly a decade, he became a shadowy figure, releasing videos from unknown locations. Each appearance reminded the world that he was still alive, still committed, and still dangerous. His words inspired other extremist groups, from the Middle East to Africa, creating a new wave of decentralized terrorism. Despite his seclusion, he remained a symbol of defiance to his followers but to the world. He was a fugitive who embodied the horror of terrorism. The hunt for bin Laden was relentless, involving intelligence agencies, surveillance, and years of painstaking work. The breakthrough came in 2010, when U.S. intelligence tracked a trusted courier to a compound in Abbottabad, Pakistan. After months of surveillance, they confirmed bin Laden's presence. On May 2, 2011, Operation Neptune Spear was launched. A team of Navy SEALs flew in under the cover of darkness, stormed the compound, and killed bin Laden in a firefight. His death was a moment of relief for many, especially the families of 9/11 victims, though it did not erase the scars of that day. His burial at sea was intended to prevent his grave from becoming a shrine. With him gone, Al-Qaeda weakened, but the ideology he championed did not disappear. Groups like ISIS would later rise, inspired in part by his blueprint of terror. The legacy of Osama bin Laden is complex and deeply troubling. He was a man born into wealth and privilege who chose a path of destruction. His actions caused wars, toppled governments, and reshaped global security. Airports, borders, and intelligence agencies across the world were transformed because of the threat he represented. He left behind a trail of devastation that continues to affect millions of lives. Yet his story also shows the resilience of nations and people who refuse to be broken by violence. The attacks he masterminded were designed to divide, but instead, they also brought unity, remembrance, and resolve. To this day, bin Laden remains a figure studied by historians, intelligence experts, and political analysts. Was he a strategist who understood the weaknesses of global powers? Or was he a fanatic blinded by ideology? Perhaps he was both. A man who believed he was fighting a holy war, but who instead became responsible for one of the darkest chapters in modern history. His life is a cautionary tale of how radical ideas, fueled by resources and networks, can change the world in terrifying ways. The story of Osama bin Laden is not just about terrorism, but about the dangerous intersection of ideology, religion, and power. It is a story that shaped the 21st century, and one that continues to echo in the conflicts we see today. Osama bin Laden's path to becoming the world's most notorious terrorist was shaped by a combination of personal background, historical events, and ideology. He was the 17th son of Mohammed bin Awad bin Laden, a Yemeni immigrant who rose from poverty to become one of Saudi Arabia's richest men, thanks to lucrative construction contracts with the royal family. This wealth gave Osama a life of privilege, but also placed him within a conservative environment that emphasized Islamic values. As a young man, he was described as quiet, disciplined, and deeply religious. While his half-brothers and siblings pursued business, luxury, and Western education, Osama gravitated toward religion and the growing Islamist movements of the 1970s. The defining moment in his early life was the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979. For many Muslims, this was seen as a foreign occupation of a Muslim land, and it galvanized thousands of volunteers to join the Afghan resistance. Bin Laden, in his early 20s, traveled to Pakistan and Afghanistan, using his resources to fund fighters, supply weapons, and build infrastructure. He was not the most skilled warrior, but his wealth and organizational ability made him valuable. He developed networks of Arab volunteers, established guest houses and camps, and forged connections with key Islamist figures. For him, Afghanistan was proof that Muslims with faith and determination could defeat a superpower. When the Soviets withdrew in 1989, bin Laden believed it was a divine victory, and he carried that conviction into his future battles. After Afghanistan, bin Laden returned to Saudi Arabia, where he was initially hailed as a hero for his role in the jihad. But the Gulf War in 1990 changed everything. When Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, bin Laden offered to raise an army of mujahideen to defend Saudi Arabia. The Saudi royal family instead invited U.S. forces to station troops on Saudi soil, something bin Laden considered a grave betrayal. For him, the presence of American troops in the land of Mecca and Medina was intolerable. His anger toward the Saudi monarchy and the United States deepened, and in 1991, he left Saudi Arabia, moving first to Sudan, where he found refuge and continued building his networks. In Sudan, bin Laden invested in businesses, farms, and construction projects, but behind these activities he continued his mission of global jihad. It was during this period that Al-Qaeda truly began to take shape as an organization, training recruits, establishing bases, and planning attacks. The U.S. pressured Sudan to expel him, and by 1996, bin Laden relocated to Afghanistan, where the EIR Taliban had risen to power. Under their protection, Al-Qaeda flourished, building camps that trained thousands of militants from across the Muslim world. Bin Laden's ideology hardened into a singular focus, attacking the United States, which he believed was the source of oppression against Muslims everywhere. In August 1996, bin Laden issued his declaration of war against the Americans occupying the land of the two holy places, calling for attacks on U.S. forces in Saudi Arabia. In 1998, he went further, signing a fatwa alongside other extremists that declared it the duty of Muslims to kill Americans and their allies, civilians and military alike. These declarations were not just words. They were followed by action. In August 1998, Al-Qaeda operatives detonated massive truck bombs outside U.S. embassies in Nairobi, Kenya, and Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. The blasts killed over 200 people and wounded thousands, many of them Africans who had no connection to U.S. policy. The attacks shocked the world and put bin Laden at the top of America's most wanted list. President Bill Clinton ordered cruise missile strikes on suspected Al-Qaeda camps in Afghanistan and a pharmaceutical factory in Sudan, believed to be linked to chemical weapons. Bin Laden survived, and his myth grew among followers who saw him as a man defying the most powerful nation on earth. In October 2000, Al-Qaeda struck again, this time targeting the USS Cole, a U.S. Navy destroyer docked in Yemen. A small boat, packed with explosives, rammed into the vessel, killing 17 sailors. This attack further demonstrated Al-Qaeda's reach and determination. American intelligence agencies knew bin Laden was planning something larger, but the scale of what was to come would surpass all imagination. On September 11, 2001, bin Laden's vision reached its horrific climax. 19 hijackers, most of them Saudi nationals, took control of 4 commercial airliners. 2 were flown into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in New York City, 1 into the Pentagon in Virginia, and 1, United Flight 93, was brought down by brave passengers in Pennsylvania before it could reach its target, believed to be the Capitol or the White House. Nearly 3,000 people were killed, including office workers, firefighters, police officers, and ordinary travelers. The images of planes slamming into skyscrapers, flames and smoke filling the New York skyline, and the collapse of the towers became seared into global memory. The attacks were not only an assault on the United States, but a symbolic attack on modern civilization itself. For bin Laden, 9/11 was meant to draw the United States into a war he believed would drain it economically and militarily, just as the Soviet Union had been drained in Afghanistan. In his mind, the attacks were a strategic blow designed to provoke overreaction. The U.S. did respond with overwhelming force, launching Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan to dismantle Al-Qaeda and topple the Taliban regime that sheltered him. Within weeks, Al-Qaeda's camps were destroyed, and many fighters killed or captured. But bin Laden himself slipped away, reportedly escaping the Battle of Tora Bora in December 2001, vanishing into the rugged mountains on the Afghan-Pakistan border. For the next decade, bin Laden became a fugitive, but also a symbol. He released video and audio messages, praising attacks, encouraging followers, and justifying 9/11 as a strike against American imperialism. He was seen occasionally on grainy tapes, his long beard turning gray, his health reportedly deteriorating, but his words still resonating with extremists around the world. Al-Qaeda, though weakened, inspired affiliates in Iraq, North Africa, and Southeast Asia. While the U.S. and its allies poured resources into wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, bin Laden remained free, hidden by loyal networks. The hunt for bin Laden consumed enormous effort from American intelligence. Analysts followed financial trails, communications, and movements of suspected couriers. In 2010, a breakthrough came when a trusted bin Laden courier was tracked to a compound in Abbottabad, Pakistan, a city not far from the country's military academy. The compound was unusual: high walls, no phone or internet lines, and residents who never left. Months of surveillance convinced the CIA that bin Laden was there. On the night of May 1, 2011, U.S. Navy SEALs launched Operation Neptune Spear. Flying in helicopters under the cover of darkness, they stormed the compound. In a brief but intense firefight, bin Laden was killed with shots to the chest and head. The SEALs secured his body, along with computers and documents, before departing. Hours later, President Barack Obama announced to the world that Osama bin Laden was dead. Crowds gathered outside the White House and across the United States, chanting and waving flags. For many, it was a moment of justice, though it did not erase the pain of 9/11. His body was buried at sea within 24 hours, in accordance with Islamic practices, to prevent any grave from becoming a shrine. The death of bin Laden closed a chapter, but did not end the story of terrorism. Al-Qaeda splintered, and new groups emerged, most notably ISIS, which built on the same ideology of jihad but pursued even more brutal tactics. Bin Laden's vision of global jihad continues to inspire extremists, even as the world condemns his legacy. For scholars and analysts, his life raises questions about the forces that create extremism: poverty and privilege, religion and politics, war and occupation. For many, he remains the embodiment of fanaticism, a man who believed he was serving God, but who brought only destruction. Yet the impact of Osama bin Laden goes beyond terrorism. He reshaped international relations, security policies, and daily life for millions of people. Airport screenings, surveillance programs, anti-terror laws, and military interventions all grew from the shadow of 9/11. The wars in Afghanistan and Iraq cost hundreds of thousands of lives and trillions of dollars. Entire generations grew up in a world defined by the war on terror. Bin Laden's actions forced governments and societies to confront difficult balances between security and freedom, fear, and resilience. Looking back, the story of Osama bin Laden is not only about one man, but about the intersection of ideology, history, and global politics. His life demonstrates how radical ideas, when fueled by wealth, networks, and opportunity, can destabilize the world. But his death also shows that no figure, no matter how elusive, is beyond reach. The memory of his crimes and the tragedy of 9/11 remain powerful reminders of the destructive potential of extremism. For those who lost loved ones on that September morning, for the soldiers who fought in the wars that followed, and for millions who live in a world still shaped by his actions, Osama bin Laden's legacy is one of pain, loss, and lessons that must not be forgotten. His name will forever be linked to terror, but also to the resilience of those who endured and resisted. In the end, he sought to divide the world, but his actions united people in grief, remembrance, and the determination that such an atrocity must never happen again. Osama bin Laden's influence did not end with his death in Abbottabad. His life story became a case study for governments, scholars, and security agencies, offering insight into how ideology, networks, and opportunity can merge into a global threat. Even though he was eliminated in 2011, the structures and narratives he built continue to ripple through world affairs. Al-Qaeda itself weakened but did not vanish. Splinter groups and affiliates carried on its mission in regions like Yemen, North Africa, and Somalia. These groups borrowed bin Laden's rhetoric, his strategy of asymmetric warfare, and his vision of inspiring lone actors and cells to wage jihad against the West. In that sense, the ghost of bin Laden continued to haunt the world long after his physical absence. For ordinary people, the aftermath of bin Laden's actions reshaped everyday life. Air travel became one of the most visible symbols of the new security reality. Before 9/11, airport screenings were relatively simple. Afterward, the introduction of full-body scanners, restrictions on liquids, shoes off at security lines, and no-fly lists became routine. For a generation, flying became synonymous with vigilance. Governments invested billions into counter-terrorism infrastructure, surveillance, and intelligence-sharing agreements. These changes touched not just the United States, but countries across the globe, demonstrating how the actions of one man could transform the way billions of people live. For the United States, bin Laden's attack triggered 2 decades of war. The war in Afghanistan, launched to destroy Al-Qaeda and remove the Taliban, became America's longest war, lasting 20 years before U.S. forces withdrew in 2021. The war in Iraq, justified partly by fears of terrorism and weapons of mass destruction, toppled Saddam Hussein but also unleashed chaos that birthed new extremist groups. These conflicts claimed the lives of hundreds of thousands of soldiers and civilians. They reshaped politics not just in the Middle East but across Europe and America, where debates about security, immigration, and human rights became central. Bin Laden wanted to provoke America into costly, endless wars, and in many ways he succeeded. Yet, bin Laden underestimated the resilience of societies. In New York, the site of the worst attack, the rebuilt World Trade Center stands as a symbol of recovery. The families of victims, though scarred forever, created memorials and foundations to honor their loved ones. The annual reading of names at Ground Zero is a reminder that terrorism can cause devastation, but not erase memory or dignity. In many ways, the legacy of those lost on 9/11 has become stronger than the ideology of the man who ordered their deaths. Bin Laden's personal story also reveals contradictions. He was born into luxury, the son of a billionaire family with connections to royalty. Yet he chose to reject that privilege for a life in caves and compounds, waging war on the very systems that had enriched him. His followers often came from Poor or disenfranchised backgrounds, yet he himself was proof that extremism is not only born from poverty. It can grow from ideology, conviction, and a sense of destiny. His belief that he was chosen for a divine mission blinded him to the human suffering he caused. To him, the deaths of thousands were justified sacrifices in a holy war, but to the rest of the world, they were innocent lives destroyed by fanaticism. The story of bin Laden also raises uncomfortable questions about geopolitics. During the 1980s, when the United States supported Afghan Mujahideen fighters against the Soviet Union, men like bin Laden benefited indirectly. Weapons, training, and ideology flourished in that environment. When the Cold War ended, the infrastructure of jihad did not disappear. It simply redirected itself. The monster that bin Laden became was, in part, a product of those global struggles. In that sense, his life is a warning about the unintended consequences of foreign policy. After his death, the compound in Abbottabad became a symbol of his secretive final years. Hidden in plain sight near a Pakistani military academy, the location raised questions about whether he had help or protection from local networks. His lifestyle in the compound also surprised many. Far from a glamorous hideout, it was austere, with little technology, no internet, and limited contact with the outside world. Reports described him spending time with his family, watching old tapes and writing journals. The man who had once traveled the world, speaking to crowds and leading a network, spent his last decade in isolation, a prisoner of his own infamy. When U.S. forces retrieved his body, they also collected a treasure trove of documents and hard drives. These files revealed his continuing involvement in Al-Qaeda operations, but also a man increasingly worried about his legacy and the effectiveness of his movement. He wrote about media strategy, security concerns, and even his frustrations with younger militants who did not follow his vision. It painted a picture of a leader who was both feared and out of touch, clinging to relevance while the world changed around him. Today, more than a decade after his death, Osama bin Laden remains one of the most infamous names in modern history. His image, tall, bearded, often seen with a rifle by his side, has become a symbol of terror. But beyond the image lies a cautionary tale about how ideology, when mixed with resources and opportunity, can unleash chaos on a global scale. His legacy is not only in the destruction he caused, but in the lessons learned by those who vowed never to let such an attack happen again. Intelligence sharing between nations, counterterrorism strategies, and vigilance at every level are part of the world he left behind. At the same time, his story is also about the resilience of people. The firefighters who ran into burning towers, the passengers on Flight 93 who fought back, the families who built memorials and carried on. These are the counterpoints to bin Laden's darkness. He wanted to inspire fear and division, but instead, he revealed the strength of human courage and unity. In the end, Osama bin Laden's life was a path of destruction. He began as a wealthy young man with every opportunity for success, yet he chose to dedicate himself to an ideology of hate. He believed he could change the world through terror, and for a time, he did. But his legacy is not victory. His name is remembered not with honor, but with infamy. The world knows him not as a hero, but as the man who brought death and sorrow to thousands of innocent people. The story of Osama bin Laden is more than the story of one man. It is the story of an age defined by terror, conflict, and resilience. It is a reminder of how fragile peace can be, how dangerous ideas can spread, and how important it is to confront extremism before it takes root. For future generations, his name will remain a warning of what happens when fanaticism is allowed to grow unchecked. For those who lived through his era, his memory is tied forever to the morning of September 11, 2001, a day when the world changed forever. And yet, beyond the fear and destruction, there is a lesson of hope. For even though Osama bin Laden succeeded in carrying out unimaginable horror, he failed in his ultimate goal. He did not destroy nations. He did not divide the world beyond repair. He did not stop life from moving forward. Instead, his death and his memory stand as proof that terror can never truly conquer the human spirit.